I remember the call with perfect clarity, not because it hurt, it did, but because it was the last time I let someone else's opinion of me define my reality. It was a Friday. I had just finished reviewing quarterly reports at the office. As a senior financial analyst at a mid-size consulting firm, my evenings were usually quiet. Spreadsheets, forecasts, the kind of work people find boring. My wife, Sarah, certainly did. We'd been married for 9 years. She worked in marketing at a tech startup downtown, flashy office, open bar Fridays, the kind of place where everyone is young and ambitious and thinks finance people are dinosaurs. My phone rang, her name on the screen. I answered. "You're on speaker," she said. No hello, no warmth. I heard laughter, music, glasses clinking. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "Actually, Marcus, everything is finally okay." Her voice was performative, playing to an audience. "I'm done. We're done. I've met someone who actually understands ambition, someone who doesn't spend his life buried in numbers." Cheers erupted. Actual applause. I said nothing. There was nothing to say yet. "His name is David," she continued. "He's a partner at Mitchell & Associates. You know, the law firm? He's been advising me on options." More laughter. Someone shouted, "Tell him about the spreadsheets." Sarah giggled. "David thinks it's adorable that you still use Excel. Apparently, real professionals moved on years ago." I let her finish. When the noise died down, I spoke. "Sarah, I have one question." The room went quieter, sensing something. "Did David explain the conflict of interest in a lawyer advising a client he's sleeping with, especially regarding marital assets?" Dead silence. I hung up. The next morning, Sarah came home with boxes. David waited in his Mercedes outside, engine running. I was at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, reviewing a document. She seemed annoyed that I wasn't crying. "I'm taking my things," she said. "David's firm is handling the divorce. You'll hear from them Monday." I nodded. "Okay." She paused, thrown off by my calm. "That's it, okay? What would you like me to say?" She grabbed her jewelry box, some clothes, a few things from the bathroom. At the door, she turned. "You know, I thought you'd fight, but I guess that's the problem. You never fight for anything." I took a sip of coffee. "I fight for things worth fighting for." She left. Over the next 2 weeks, the legal machinery started grinding. David's firm sent aggressive letters demanding the house, half my retirement accounts, and alimony based on lifestyle maintenance. They listed my salary, $127,000, as the basis. They didn't ask for my full financial disclosure. They assumed they knew everything. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was David himself, a partner at a reputable firm, sleeping with a client whose divorce he was personally managing. In legal terms, this is called a conflict of interest. In practical terms, it meant every document he touched was potentially compromised, but I didn't react. Not yet. I filed my responses on time. I hired my own attorney, a quiet woman named Margaret Chen, who specialized in high-asset divorces. She reviewed everything, asked me detailed questions, and never once raised her voice. "They're being sloppy," she said during our second meeting. "They think this is routine." "Good," I said, "let them think that." Here's what Sarah never understood about me. I am boring on purpose. I don't talk about my work because most people don't care about financial modeling. I don't brag about achievements because I was raised to believe that results speak for themselves. And I don't share details about money because I was taught that wealth whispers. What Sarah saw: a man who came home, ate dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed. A man who wore the same 3 suits. A man who never wanted to go to her startup parties. What Sarah missed, the rest. 3 years before that speakerphone call, my firm landed a major contract with a Fortune 500 company. I led the analysis team. We identified $43 million in operational inefficiencies. The client saved a fortune. I was promoted to Director of Strategic Finance. My base salary went from $127,000 to $185,000. My bonus that year was $60,000. I never mentioned it to Sarah. She never asked. 2 years before the call, I was approached by a private equity firm. They wanted me to consult on acquisition targets. The work was complex, high stakes, and extremely well paid. I took the contract. An additional $120,000 per year, deposited into an account Sarah didn't know existed. Not hidden, just separate. The account statements went to my office. 1 year before the call, I was offered an equity stake in a startup I'd been advising. A healthcare analytics company. Nothing flashy, just solid fundamentals and a good team. I invested $50,000 of my own savings. 8 months later, the company was acquired. My stake was worth $1. $2 million after taxes. I told no one. I simply moved the money to a brokerage account and continued my routine. The night Sarah called me from that party, my net worth was approximately $1.8 million. Not generational wealth, not lottery money. Just years of compound competence invested wisely by a man everyone assumed was just an analyst. During the divorce proceedings, I said nothing about any of this. David's firm requested my tax returns from the previous year. I provided them, but only what was legally required. They saw my W-2 income. They didn't ask about investment accounts. They didn't request brokerage statements. They assumed a boring man had boring finances. Margaret Chen, my attorney, advised patience. They're going to lowball the settlement offer, she said. They think you're desperate. Let them. So I let them. For 4 months I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, went to the gym, read books, and slept 8 hours. I didn't date. I didn't post on social media. I didn't contact Sarah. I processed my grief privately. The marriage had been dying for years, and I'd been too conflict-averse to admit it. Losing Sarah wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy was the 9 years I spent becoming invisible in my own home. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was simply quiet. Meanwhile, I built a file. Screenshots of David and Sarah's public Instagram posts, vacations, dinners, jewelry, all time-stamped during our marriage. Records of David's involvement in my case, signed with his own name. Financial documents showing Sarah's spending during the separation, funded by joint credit cards she assumed I wasn't monitoring. Every email, every receipt, every contradiction. I didn't do this out of anger. Anger fades. I did it because I read the law, understood the process, and followed it to the letter. When you do that, the truth becomes undeniable. By the time the final hearing arrived, I had 112 pages of documented evidence, and they had assumptions. The courtroom was small. A judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, Sarah, David, and me. David sat in the gallery, not at the counsel table, a technicality to avoid the appearance of conflict. It didn't matter. Everyone knew. Sarah looked confident. She wore a new dress, new earrings. She glanced at me with something like pity. Her attorney, a junior associate from David's firm, began the proceedings. Your Honor, my client seeks equitable distribution of marital assets, including the family home and appropriate spousal support based on the income disparity between the parties. The judge nodded. And the respondent? Margaret stood. Your Honor, we'd like to submit a complete financial disclosure, which the petitioner's counsel failed to request. She handed a thick folder to the clerk. The judge opened it, read the first page, turned to the second. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Chen, she said, your disclosed assets total approximately $1.87 million. Sarah's attorney dropped his pen. Sarah's face went pale. In the gallery, David sat forward. That's correct, Your Honor, Margaret said. My client is a director of strategic finance with significant investment income. The petitioner's counsel relied on outdated W-2 information and failed to conduct proper discovery. The judge looked at Sarah's attorney. Is this accurate? He stammered. We understood the respondent's income to be... You understood incorrectly. The judge's voice was flat. Continue. Margaret presented the evidence calmly. The Instagram posts, the credit card statements, the timeline of the affair overlapping with David's legal representation. Your Honor, we are also filing a formal complaint with the State Bar regarding Mr. David Mitchell's conduct. A partner at a law firm cannot ethically represent a client with whom he is engaged in a romantic relationship, particularly in a divorce proceeding involving that client's spouse. David stood up. This is... Sit down, Mr. Mitchell. You're not counsel on this case. and you're about to make things worse for yourself." He sat. The room was silent. Not the dramatic silence of movies, just the uncomfortable quiet of people realizing they've made a serious mistake. The judge reviewed the documents for several minutes. Then she spoke. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm denying the petition for spousal support. Mrs. Chen's documented spending during the separation, funded by marital assets, exceeds what she would have received in temporary support. Additionally, the undisclosed relationship between Mrs. Chen and her legal advisor raises serious ethical concerns that will be referred to the appropriate authorities." She looked at Sarah. "Mrs. Chen, you are entitled to half of the marital assets accumulated during the marriage. However, given the significant premarital and separate property documented by Mr. Chen, that amount is considerably less than you anticipated. My clerk will calculate the exact figures." Sarah started to speak. Her attorney touched her arm. She stopped. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Chen, do you have anything to add?" I stood. "No, Your Honor. I just want this concluded." "Granted. We're adjourned." I picked up my briefcase. Margaret shook my hand. We walked toward the exit. Sarah intercepted me in the hallway. Her mascara was smudged. David was nowhere in sight. "Marcus, wait," her voice cracked. I never knew you." "I know," I said. "You never asked." I walked out into the afternoon sun. 6 months later, I sold the house. I bought a smaller place, a 2-bedroom condo with good light and a balcony overlooking a park. I donated half the furniture. I kept the books, the cast-iron pan and the coffee maker. My routine became simple. Wake at 6, coffee, gym, work, home by 7. Dinner, usually something simple, grilled fish, vegetables, a glass of wine. Silence. Real silence. The kind that isn't empty but full. I read the news about David. The state bar suspended his license pending an ethics investigation. Mitchell and Associates quietly removed his name from the letterhead. Last I heard, he was doing contract work in another state. Sarah sent me a letter. Handwritten, she apologized. She said she'd been lost, arrogant, blind. She asked if we could talk. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty. There was simply nothing left to say. I ran into her once, about a year later. She was waiting at a bus stop. Her car had broken down, she explained. It was raining. I offered her a ride. She accepted. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. When I pulled up to her apartment building, a modest place in a different part of town, she paused before getting out. "You look good, Marcus." "Happy." "I am. I'm sorry. For everything." "I know." She nodded, opened the door and stepped into the rain. I watched her walk inside. Then I drove home. I made dinner. I poured a glass of wine. I sat on my balcony and watched the city lights. I thought about the years I spent being invisible, about the work I did in silence, about the man I became when no one was watching. And I realized something. Revenge was never the goal. Revenge is exhausting. It requires you to carry someone else's weight. I just stopped carrying. The weight was never mine to begin with.